Thank you so much, Gary, for the introduction, and thank you so much for having us here to today. Welcome, everybody. My name is Henrik, and as Gary mentioned, I'm the managing director of the Value Union Consulting here in the MENA region. So first, a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, please do raise your hand, send a question through the Q&A function in front of you on the screen. There'll be 3 dedicated moments throughout the presentation that will answer them. And then we'll also, of course, have a Q&A at the end of this. We'll also be available offline at a later point and if needed in that. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can while keeping a good flow in the presentation. All right, so a little bit who we are and what it is that we do. So on an overall basis, we help corporates incubate entrepreneurship, facilitate innovation, and accelerate growth. That took us a long time to come up with that, and even longer for me to learn how to say it in easily in this. So we've been around for about 10 years. We came to the region about 3 years ago to work primarily for Shalhoub Group in their digital transformation. We have since then focused over on the more entrepreneurship, the acceleration, the incubation, growth part of everything. We have offices in about 4 countries and about 25 consultants in all. So a little bit about Jeremy, if you will.
Yes, so I was born and raised in Belgium, the land of chocolate, fries, and the European Parliament. A bit less interesting. I studied an international management program, which is called SEMS and is given in 28 schools in the world. And I started my career at the consumer packaged goods giants Unilever, where I stayed for 5 years in marketing and sales roles before moving to Dubai and moving into innovation and growth consulting. And I got married very recently, so that's on the personal side, right before we moved to Dubai.
Well, perfect. And a little bit of about me. So my team for our presentation some time ago decided to set this up in the Dolly Parts and meme kind of setup. So I thought we'd just continue with that one. I've been in the region for 8 years. I've worked both as an entrepreneur. I have my own e-commerce site that we grew into a leading online space. I have worked in a scale-up straight out of university. When I joined, we were about 200 people. When I left a few years later, we were about 1,200 people in that company. And I've worked as a consultant, as an advisor to some of the largest corporations in the MENA region. So this is a little bit about me. I still don't understand why my colleagues put in the Instagram photo of the juice. I don't know if that's because I'm fresh or what it is, but this is a little bit about me without going into too much details. It's not the most interesting topic, let's be honest. So let's move on to what we're here to talk about today. So what we're going to be talking about today is growth hacking by Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown. Initially, the phrase was coined by Sean Ellis more than 10 years ago in publications that he did in his blog post. He was one of the first, if not the first, as you say, marketeer at Dropbox. And he was sought after throughout the whole Silicon Valley to help companies grow exponentially throughout their performance. Based on that, in 2017, he wrote a book, The New Field of Marketing, as we call it, on hacking growth and how do you set all these things up. So he's very, very famous if you're within this. So is his co-author, Morgan Brown. As part of this, we'll come back to some of their stories and some of their setup throughout this presentation. So let's jump straight in. So what is growth hacking? Growth hacking is a process of rapidly experimenting with and implementing marketing and promotional strategies that are solely focused and efficient in rapid business growth. Growth hacking focuses on achieving fast results with minimal expenditures. We'll come back to that in a second. The hacking part is about finding clever shortcuts that bring big results. Mark these words in that. Growth hacking is a customer acquisition and retention strategy that sits at the intersection of product development and marketing. Therefore, growth is a mindset. To illustrate that, I don't know if you guys know this person, but very famous in certain circles. His name is Takaru Kobayashi. In 2001, he set the record for eating the most hot dogs. So he went from 25 to 50. What did he do? He looked at it from a different angle. So he redefined the problem he was trying to solve. He looked at 2 specific aspects. How could I fit more hot dogs into my stomach? And how can I make one hot dog easier to eat? So he went away and he started looking at this. So he started practicing drinking a little bit more water every day to stretch out his stomach. He started separating the hot dogs from the buns so the sausages from the buns. He snapped the sausages, the wieners, into half, swallowing them in one bite with a lot of hot dog bun that's dunked in hot water. Because what he realized as well is the small things matters. So also the heat of the water was imperative to how quickly he could eat it. Cold water constricts the stomach, and hot water opens it up. So that was just to give you guys a little bit of introduction, a little bit of insights into what is growth hacking and what is it all about. So let's just quickly look at why we're doing growth hacking. The reason why we're doing growth hacking is very simple. Some of the overall elements that we're looking in here is, of course, from a traditional perspective, it's fairly easy or simpler to set these things up. We had to be creative with the words. The channels were more or less the same. But what's happened in recent years, especially after social media, is that we've had to compete with our messaging and our channels in a much larger perspective in that out there. So it's become a lot more what you call complicated in that. Social channels might be cheaper and it can have a great impact. But the big issue is at the same time that we're all fishing in the same pond. Our click-through rates are decreasing. Our cost per click is increasing, which basically means that you pay more money for less results. Therefore, with limited resources, we need to maximize the impact of what we are implementing and what it is that we're doing. So that was a little bit of a quick introduction to you guys. So here's the overall setup for today. We're going to take you through 3 overall elements. Within each of these elements, there'll be a quick session. Again, you can ask your questions in the low point of the Q&A parts on your screen. So the first element is, how do you set up teams and how do you set up growth hack goals? Second part is building a growth funnel. The fourth part will be on growth hacking process itself. After each session, we'll quickly recap and then we'll do a recap in the end. So without further ado, I will try and see if I can hand it over to Jeremy from this one up here. Jeremy, you should now be the presenter.
All right. So the first part of growth hacking is about the setup. How do you set up a team and how do you set up growth goals? And we're going to give a couple of examples here in the current in the class and in the course. But just need to keep in mind what Henrik has said. Growth hacking is a mindset. So here we're taking some examples that are applicable to a company, but it can be basically applicable to anything. So if you're trying to get more followers on your Instagram or TikTok account or whatever, this also counts. If you want to set up a new company, this counts. If you want to launch a new product, this is applicable. So you just need to think about it in a broader way. But here, of course, we need to take one line and we will take examples from different companies. So first things first, setting up teams and growth goals, which is extremely important to start. So basically, the question is, how do you make a perfect growth team? And the perfect way to set up a growth team is to take people that are in different departments, different units, and operating in different type of jobs. So what usually happens in all of the companies that have specific growth teams is that they take people that take 20% of their work and 20% of their work will be dedicated to the growth team. So usually what you would have is a product manager, a software engineer, a marketing specialist, a data analyst, and a product designer. So usually a growth team is 5 to 7 people max. On top of this growth team, there is one role that is extremely important, is the growth team leader. It's very important because growth hacking is all about making experiments and taking fast decisions that should be effective. So to take fast decisions, you need a strong leader that is able to take those decisions. The leader has the role to unite the team, to really create and establish together with the team the growth goals, but decide on those growth goals, to create a time frame and to bring a constant, clear focus to make sure that the growth team is aligned with the bigger vision of the organization. What are right and high impact growth goals? They are extremely important because everything in growth hacking needs to be measured and decisions needs to be made on data. It's not something that is subjective. It's only about objective data that you see in front of your eyes. So The characteristics of clear high-impact growth goals are multiple. They need to provide clear focus for resources, so exactly defining how many people do you need to accomplish your growth experiment, how much money do you need. It, of course, needs to support the broader company mission. So if you operate into a company or you have a global goal, even if you have a small growth team, it always needs to be linked to the mission of the company. You need, of course, to solve actual issues and challenges. It's not the objective to create new issues or new challenges. It gives the opportunities to celebrate victories. So if you can measure them right and you can measure success, then you can celebrate those victories. And it makes growth sustainable on the long run. On the other hand of the spectrum, no clear growth goals is when the team is totally out of sync with the business. So there are some examples that growth teams have been formed, that they start to work on something that is totally unrelated with the rest of the business, and there is no purpose in doing that. All of the efforts and resources that are invested are wasted, and the growth in the end stalls. So there are a couple of characteristics to best-in-class growth goals, and there are 4 of them. So the context, the targets, the time frame, and the owner. The context basically is just what I said, is to make clear to the team the reason why we have this growth goal, why it's important, and why it fits to the global company mission. Targets, it needs to be measurable. They need to be able to be tracked, communicated, and assessed on a very regular basis. The time frame is a very key part of growth hacking. Usually a growth hacking experiment, when you have a specific mission linked to specific goals and you want to hack growth, it usually lasts between 2 to 6 weeks. So it's not something that lasts for a year. A growth team that works on several, 1, 2, or 3 growth experiments, and every 2 to 6 weeks you start a new one and you start new experiments. And then the owner, each growth goal should have an owner within the growth team, and no one should take more than 1 growth goal at a time to ensure maximal focus. Now, of course, if you want to track growth and you need to have a goal, you need to be able to know what kind of metrics you will track. So this is called identifying the key metrics. And you can do that by defining what is being called in theory a fundamental growth equation. So, and again, I'm going to give you an example about eBay, but this is also applicable for anything that you're trying to hack growth with. Basically, it's thinking about what are all of the elements that make sure that you will grow in the future, that are a key success factor to growth. So I'm going to give you a very concrete example with eBay. So the fundamental growth equation for eBay is the number of sellers listing items times the number of listed items times the number of buyers times the number of successful transactions, and this all gives the gross merchandise volume growth. So those 4 key metrics define the growth for eBay. There is no other metric that is bigger or that define the growth more than those 4 key metrics. So it's worth taking some time before starting experiments and before starting to track growth to think about, okay, what are the key metrics that define this growth, and then to split it up in different parts. Now, among all of those key metrics, there is one that is more important to all of the others, and it's called the North Star. The North Star is also called the OMTM, so the one metric that matters. And every company, every growth experiment, every growth team has a North Star that is pinned on the wall and in front of everyone, and that needs to be followed. Basically, it's the one key metric that most accurately captures the core value that you create for your customers. So what sets you apart, and how do you create value for your customers? So it needs to be at the center of your growth strategy. I'm going to give you a concrete example again. So Facebook, everyone knows about Facebook. That's why I use this example. It's fairly easy to relate to. Has several key metrics. They have 5 key metrics that define their growth. Of course, you know the growth of Facebook is derived from the money they make about ads. So those are the 5 key metrics that matter. So how frequently users log in, how active users are in creating posts, how many friends requests are being sent, how many users are active daily, and how much time users spend on the site. So among those 5 metrics, there is one that is Facebook's North Star. And I'm going to give it to you, not too much suspense. And it's how many users are active daily. How many users are active daily is the one single metric that matters for Facebook. And if you go to Facebook, everyone is focused on having these metrics being bumped up and really having the best number and growing the numbers of how many users are active daily, because that's the one metric that matters the most when creating value for your customers and generating value for Facebook by doing ads. So one last thing, when you're defining the metrics, and it's quite important, is to forget vanity metrics. And I've worked for 5 years at Unilever. I can tell you, even in huge companies, this is something that we do quite often, and way too often, is that we post something or we have something, we do some digital marketing, and we're very happy about all of the likes that we got. Or if you launch an app, about how many people have installed your app, how many accounts have registered to your website. But those are vanity metrics. They are not a key metrics for growth. A lot of people can install your app, but if nobody is ordering or buying your product, then it doesn't really matter. It's just apps that are installed on cell phones. So there is a huge need to forget about those vanity metrics and to really think about what are the key metrics that actually drive growth, because you can only hack what you can measure. And this was all about the first part, which is setting up teams and goals, so forming growth teams and defining goals, drafting a fundamental growth equations, and finding a North Star.
All right. So building a growth funnel, next step. This is probably one of the most important sections in this. This is basically how you hack growth. Here's what you need to look at. This is what you need to do. So this is basically your what section of the growth hacking. So we use what we call the R funnel. So I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you might know about it. Others might think that I haven't taken my pills this morning. But the R funnel was actually something that was introduced more than 10 years ago, not by Sean Ellis, but by a guy called Dave McClure, who's a venture capital angel investor, also the founder of 500 Startups. He introduced this more than 10 years ago. It's a 5-letter framework that basically takes you through each step. So let's just straight into this. The first is, of course, acquisition. So how do you acquire customers, or how does your customer find you? It's all about your message and the channels that you use. We'll come back to this in a little bit in more detail quite shortly. Next element is, of course, activation. How good is your user first experience? How do you give your user an initial happy experience of your product and or service? Third element is when we start coming into the R's. So that's about your retention. How do you keep your customers coming back? How do you repeat? How do you get your people to come back and use your service? Here, some of the growth drivers could be loyalty campaign, push notifications, but how do you keep them using, for example, your app when you're using this? We'll come back to some examples again in a minute. Oh, the fourth level is your referral. How do you turn customers into advocates? How do you turn happy customers into advocates? And how do you get them to refer to others? Drivers here could be, of course, be one-click sharing, contact list integration, but basically, how do you help you acquire more customers for you? Fifth element is how do you increase your revenue? This is about how you optimize. If you optimize every part of the steps here, you're left with final question around this. How do you get them to pay more? How do you get them to pay for your service? How do you make money? And how much? Remember, a lot of customers out there are starting with a freemium model that they then need to get people into actually using. Just like we're seeing with Zoom, that I'm sure a lot of users are using right now. You only get up to 40 minutes. They're trying to push you through to then upgrade to the next level or buy the app in these. So these are the 5 overall steps in the R framework, the R funnel. Some of the criticism about the funnel goes that it is missing a bit of the awareness start in the beginning. Other people are starting looking more at the interchanging referral and revenue. Others are using specifically for apps. They're using the RARA element where they're moving these things around. We tend to focus, because we think it's the best setup, is the ARR framework, or the pirate metrics. This is also used in everything that we do. But the areas that we're going to focus on today are the 3 overall parts. The reason for that is these are very much the most important parts of it. When we come to referral and revenue, they're much more specific in that. But to give you guys as much value, we're going to focus in on these overall parts in today's presentation. So the first one is, of course, how do we hack acquisitions? This is all about acquiring new customers, whether offline or online. It's essential about having the right message in the right channels. So let's start with looking at what are the message. First message is key. That's all about the first impression. First impression matters. We know that. Thank God my wife doesn't believe in that. Anyway, the next part is, of course, make it short and simple. The general attention span of any human being these days is about 8 seconds. That's also why when you're on YouTube, you see that the ad bumpers that they have underneath, they last about 6 seconds. Make it short, make it simple, make it concise, and make it very clear what you're doing and what it is you're trying to sell. One of the masters, of course, Jobs, can't all be geniuses like him, but he created this. This is so clear, so concise to what it is that we're trying to do. In less than 3 seconds, he basically said 1,000 songs in your pocket. We all know what this is about. For those of you who might not completely know what an iPod is with the version before the iPhone that you all have now, without the calling and so on. It's a great invention at that time, and obviously he is the genius behind this. In 3 seconds, you know exactly what the value is and why you should buy this product. Third element is of course listening to your customers. This is all about seeing what are your customers talking about you, what kind of words are they using, not just understanding what they're saying, but also using what they're saying about you in reviews, social media, and other places, and use those words in your own communication. If you still haven't launched your own product, then go in and look at how people are reviewing, how they're talking about your competitors' products in everything you do. This is a great example of value and the benefit of listening to your customers. As an example of that, I want to share with you the example of Febreze. They were launched many years ago by Procter & Gamble. I think it was in 1998. And they said their slogan, the message was, Febreze cleans bad smell out of fabric for good. The problem was that many people at home didn't really believe that their homes, no matter how many dogs, no matter how many cats they were having, that their homes actually smell bad. So nobody was buying their product. It's going down. So they had to change. They had to pivot very, very quickly. So instead, they came up with freshness that surrounds you like never before. That was what their customers were looking for. So with a very small change, they made this very, very successful, from basically selling nothing to make it extremely successful for their companies. It actually, in about 20 years, became, or about 14 years, 13, 14 years, it actually became one of Procter & Gamble's billion-dollar product lines in that. So small changes can have a huge effect in that. All right, last part in this is, of course, run A/B test. A/B test, sure you've all heard about it. It's become extremely popular because it is awesome. It is literally a great way of testing your different messages, different advertising to the same market at the same time to see which one is most effective. As a great example of that, I'm sure you've all heard about Timothy Ferriss's 4-hour work week. What he basically did, he created 2 different campaigns on Google. One where he called it the 4-hour work week, and one that was called Rich Without the 9 to 5. So he tested these on Google and let Google basically decide which one was most effective. And that's how he came up with the name, or that's how he decided on the name, the 4-hour work week for. Great example from Timothy Harris. All right, so going into the next element of it, that's of course the channel. There are a lot of different channels. We overall divide them into 3 overall parts. There's the paid part, that's your social media, that's your advertising, all these things in there. There's the organic, that's what you post out there, what you're not paying for, what kind of goes, and then there's word of mouth and viral. So that is also what your customers are doing, and the virality of everything that's happening. The first element is what channel is driving the most growth. Basically, this revolves around looking at your data. Sorry, talking too much. Basically, looking around your data. Next one, what channel drives the most valuable traffic? This is all about your conversion. No conversion, no cash. Is that simple. Last part is what channel has the lowest acquisition cost? That's basically, very obviously, that organic has the lowest cost in that. But it's also about finding the most effective channel. What channel has the lowest cost per customer converted, as we were talking about before? So these are the 2 key elements here. The right message for the right channel. That's what we need to focus about. Use this to acquire as many potential customers as possible and give them opportunity to have their first user great experience in this. So let's actually look at how we hack this. But before we do so, the reason why hacking activation is so important is As most of you will know, only about 2% of website traffic is actually converted into actual sales. That's just to underline the importance of this in that. So when we are looking at creating a map, or hacking our activation, best thing we need to understand is where do they drop out. So create a map. Map all the steps your customers are taking from the first contact to making the. This is a great example just to illustrate it for you from Uber. So this is from the early days, just to throw out an example from them. So they saw that about 10,000 in the first weeks were downloading the app on a weekly basis. Out of those, about 80% actually created an account, but only about 6.5%, so 500 of them actually booked a ride. So they're seeing a huge dropout from creating an account to the actual conversion of this. So they realized that they had a problem. They needed to change something and needed to identify what was it that was going wrong and what could they change. So they sent out a survey to a lot of the customers, a couple of hundred that had already created an account but hadn't yet booked a ride, to understand why did they drop out? Why did they not take the last part in booking a ride? What they realized was that the vast majority of the clients didn't trust or didn't feel at ease about going into a car with somebody that they knew very little about. This wasn't a taxi. There was no real around. Remember, this was back in the old day. So once they realized that, they could, with a very simple twist, as soon as people sign up for their app, they could change it around and then communicate that they were actually doing background checks and interviews with all the drivers. And then that's when they did that, then they went into the stratosphere. And that was really one of the major elements in why Uber became Uber in that. So I want to give you a few more examples, but also introduce you guys to the aha moment. The aha moment is really the first time when it clicks for your customers. That's when they really truly see the value in your product for them. So I'll give you three very well-known examples. I'm sure you guys will know some of these. One is from Facebook. They realized that if somebody adds in 7 friends or adds 7 friends to the platform in the first 10 days, they will have that aha moment and they will be locked in to the program. So what did they figure out they needed to do? The easy hack they needed to do was to sync email accounts on Facebook with suggested friends. Very, very simple hack. I don't know if any of you remember this. This was obviously many, many years ago, but that is how they really grew. That's how they took the next steps in this. With Twitter, a little bit the same. They realized when the people signed up, if they followed more than 30 people, they would be hooked in, they would not leave, they would continue using it. So what they did was a very simple hack. They suggested 30 of the most popular accounts after the sign-up period. That's how they grew. Another one that you might also know is from Dropbox. What they realized was that once people got their when they saw the value in the services when they uploaded at least one file. So what they tried to do was to encourage people to upload a file during the sign-up period. That's how they grew. Hope this makes sense. Again, so now we've looked at these overall elements. Now let's start looking at the retention part of this. Before we do so, I think it's extremely important to really think about why retention is so important to us. Reason for that is that it's 5 to 25 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than to retain an existing one. Have a think about that a little bit, then you understand why the retention is so important. So when we look at retention, we're generally looking at 3 different categories in this. Initial retention is very much around the novelty that we're putting out there. Medium retention is very much about when the novelty starts to fade. It's about the habits becomes even more important for anyone. Long-term retention is all about making sure your product keeps being interesting, relevant, and innovative to continue to lock in your customers. As we talked about earlier, continue to have them grabbed in. So to keep this a little bit more simple, I'll go through the initial and the medium retention phase in one, and then come back to the long-term part of it. And so what we're seeing when we're talking about hacking customer retention is simply very simple when it comes to the theory, but can be very difficult when it comes to the practicalities of it. The method is to keep customers active and loyal through habits. People are creatures of habits. We all know that if you read the book, The Power of Habits. We like routines, we like habits. So how do we hack retention? by offering rewards. This is best, a prime example, pardon the pun, is of course from Amazon Prime. What they did was almost genius, almost too perfect to fit into this. But Amazon Prime, and I'm sure you all know about it, but bear with me for 1 second. It makes an offer. So you sign up for 33 trial. It rewards the customers for taking it. They get a number of benefits and instant gratifications. They provide an excellent service and offers reminders continuously as to how much they're saving. This reassures the customers that they made the right choice. But more importantly, then Amazon does what they do best. They give you a great experience. So make sure you sign up for that full year. So that means that now more than 90% of all Prime subscribers actually renew their subscription year in year. They were actually so surprised that they even surprised themselves of the success of Amazon Prime. They initially internally estimated that they would have a break-even point in about 2 years. They will break even after 3 months. Very, very successful and a great example of there are many other aspects, but generally when we're talking about retention, we can divide it into 2 overall parts. And we've tried here to give you some local examples in this. Social recognitions is all about status. This is from Kareem. I'm a Kareem Gold member. They give me something in exchange of it. I get some recognition. I get some extra points, exclusive offers, these different things as part of it. And then there is rewarding by user achievements. And this is a very simple, still very, very good from berries and boot camps. I'm sure a lot of you will know about it. So that's a quite expensive tool or quite extensive service to use. But I think their primary target audience is more overachievers, people that work long, people that really give it an extra. So what they tried to do was to push them to really use their services, go to at least 10 different sessions on a monthly basis. And for that, they would then reward them with a small berries cap for free. And it's not about the reward, it's about pushing, making that challenge, and rewarding them for achieving the different elements in that. So 2 very interesting, we believe, local examples of the 2 main aspects: social recognition and rewarding achievements in this. So let's look at the more long-term part of this. This basically boils down to 2 different elements. You need to keep them interested by doing these 2 things. Optimize your current features constantly. You do that by talking to your customers. Second part is launch new features. Innovation is and will always be the basis of growth. Very simple. All right, so this has been the framework of that. And we focused on the top elements in this. Happy to have a conversation with you guys offline about referral and renewal or revenue, but we thought these are the most important aspects that we have. So
awesome. So Henrik has talked about the what. Now we're going to talk about the how. So it's good to know what to hack, but now what is very important is you cannot do it all. You need to choose what you're gonna hack in the process, and the how part is really going to help you do that. And there are 4 stages of the growth hacking process. So of course, this is linked to the first part. Remember, always have your growth goal in the middle of it, and your growth goal should already guide you towards what you should be hacking and what you should be improving in the process. But there are 4 stages. I'm going to go into a bit more detail into each one of them. So the first one is to analyze, the second one is to ideate, the third one is to prioritize, and the last one is to test. And they go round and round and round. So after the test, as I told you, growth experiments between 2 to 6 weeks, you go back to the analyze stage, and then you go around again. So let's deep dive very quickly into a bit of them. So as we explained, growth hacking is very much based on the data. And one most important thing is to collect the right customer insights to make trends and patterns appear. And there are 3 questions that you should ask yourself, 2 that are internal to your product and 1 that is external. The 3 questions are, what are my best customers' behaviors? Because that will give you an insight on what you do best and what you're very, very good at. What are the characteristics of my best customers? Because this will give you an insight on your target audience and where you should focus and how you should actually tweak your growth experiments. And the last one is to go about what are the events that cause users to abandon the product. So you take a look at your fans, and you take a look at the ones that leave your product. And this will guide you into gathering data. And then you gather data in 2 very distinctive ways that everybody knows: quantitative data, and qualitative data, and this is very important, and a lot of companies actually drop that because they think it's a bit too complicated, but conducting a set of surveys and interviews with customers that are your fans or that are dropping off is extremely important, and it will really give you a lot of data to actually know what you need to hack to unlock growth. Second stage afterwards, when you believe you have a good answer to these three questions, is to ideate. And there is one rule in ideation, is that the best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas. So what you want to facilitate is really a platform or a space or a meeting or a moment where people can give a lot of ideas. And then from all of those ideas, you will determine which one you want to pursue. But this is the best way, and this is how Sean Ellis, and this actually works really well. He advises on how to ideate. So anyone, and this can even go outside of your growth team. What we do with Duval Union Consulting is we organize a lot of ideation session for full companies. So it can be 350 people in a room generating new ideas to solve complex issues. So this is really for everyone. You have an idea. What you do is that you set up an idea name. You describe it very quickly. Then you give an hypothesis or what should be you think the answer to that idea, or what will be the consequence, and what are the metrics to be measured. And this is how an idea should be structured. And you could have, like, I don't know, a space in your small office or online where a lot of people post those ideas, and then you review them every week, for example. If you do that process right, you will end up for one complex issues or several complex issues with hundreds of ideas. Recently, we did a project with a client, and we had to go through 270 ideas. And out of those 270, we took out 7 that we actually pursued and implemented as growth experiments. So it's really, you go very wide to go narrow again afterwards. Then you prioritize. And if you do the ideation part good, you have 100 ideas, maybe more, then you need to make sure to have a good system to prioritize them. And this is done using the ICE framework. So what is it? It's pretty clear and simple to understand. It's impact, confidence, and ease. ICE, impact, confidence, and ease. Each one of them is rated from 0 to 10 and should be rated from 0 to 10. So what is impact? So basically, how will the idea improve the core metric being focused on? Again, linked to your growth goal, you have a specific goal. This idea should solve your goal, should not be disconnected to the goal or to the rest of the organization. Confidence, how strongly does the idea generator believes the idea will produce the expected results? So the person that brings out the idea say, I have an 8 out of 10 confidence, then this can actually solve the issue. Then the last part is ease. So that is a measure of the time and resources that are needed to run the experiment. So if you have a 10 out of 10, that needs no time and no resources. We can do it like that. It's a quick win. Let's implement it. Let's do it. If you have like a 1, maybe it needs a specific team. It needs a lot of money, validation from the board, etc., etc. It's more complicated. Once you have this, you should have a meeting with all of your ideas together. And this is where the growth team leader is very important, because he will make the decision. But all of those ideas are taken with a score. So impact score, confidence score, E-score, and an average score, which will really help you shortlist the ideas. And then depending on the size of your team, you can say, okay, let's shortlist to 5 ideas, or maybe even less, or maybe 10 ideas. And then once you have those 5 to 10 ideas at the end of the day, what you need to do is you need to map them on an impact ease matrix. So you have ease on the x-axis, you have impact on your y-axis, and the growth team leader needs to map each idea or where he thinks it's really easy or where the impact would be the biggest. And then you have 4 quadrants, and all of the ideas that land in here are basically ideas that you need to do now, because they're pretty easy to implement. They have a high impact. Those are quick wins. Those are the experiments that you're going to pursue and that you're going to implement right now. Those are your growth experiments that you will focus on. Those ones here are the ones that are pretty easy to make, but they have a low impact to the goal. So lower impact, at least. So they're not your priority. So you can make a task out of it because it's pretty easy. So it should not be number 1 priority, but maybe number 2 priority as an experiment. Here, those ones, the ideas that land they need a lot of resources. They probably need a lot of resources, and they're not easy to implement. So maybe you need a lot of time, a lot of people, a lot of money. You need to validate them, etc., etc. So you make a project out of it. And the attributes of a project is that there are several team members. You need to talk about it. You need to have a specific structure. And this is where this lands. And those ones, low impact and low ease, not a big surprise. You forget them for now, and you focus on the ones that are going to have the biggest impact. Once you have done this, you should have prioritized the ideas that are most important, that are in the do now, and those make your growth experiments. Those are the experiments that you're going to really implement. So remember, you come from data, you ideated 100, 200 ideas, you prioritized 5 to 10 ideas, you mapped them, and now maybe you have 3 experiments that you want to implement in the coming 2 to 6 weeks. So how does an experiment look like? It's basically this. So you name the experiment. So here it doesn't really matter about the contents, more of the form and how it looks like. You name the experiment, you explain why you think it will work, you explain the action steps and how it will be executed, what is the success criteria, and what is the length of the experiment. And this is basically your dashboard on tracking the experiment. And now afterwards, every week you will review, okay, how much have we advanced? We have 6 weeks to do this. So what is the action plan? When do we do this? When do we do that to achieve your goal at the end of the 6 weeks? And to be honest, your goal, and that is the last part, you come back to the analyze part, you analyze the test results and you write a test summary. You don't always have to win, and it doesn't have to be a success. That's the goal of growth hacking, is that you try different hacks. Sometimes it works and it has a huge positive impact and it's great. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it gives you other ideas and other data that allow you to pivot and maybe make a new growth experiment that this one will have ideas. So you cannot have 100% success rate that doesn't exist. But you can try to have quite a high success rate and make some of them a huge success that have a huge impact for your company. So those are the 4 stages of the growth hacking process, and those should drive the experiments, and the input and the content of the experiment is about what Henrik explained: hacking acquisition, hacking activation, and hacking retention. Effectively, later on the process, hacking referral and revenue, which are a bit more complex, but that's basically the basics. To be honest, that's basically it. That's what you need to know about growth hacking. And if you know this about growth hacking, 95% of it is in there. How do you set up teams and goal? How do you build a growth funnel? How do you hack acquisition, activation, retention? And what are the 4 stages of the growth hacking process?